Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic today is chocolate cities in crises, and we have with us to talk about some of the crises in urban America today, dealing with cities that have a large African Hispanic chocolate population. Dr. DPadgett from Tennessee State University in the Department of History, Geography, and Political Science. And of course, Dr. Padgett, let me welcome you to the show this morning and to tell you how delighted we are to have you here, and especially the topic that you have with us today. But before we get into that, Dr. Padgett, let's have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of eventually leading you to Tennessee State University, and then we'll look at these cities that you've identified as being cities in crises today and talk about them.
Okay, well, my background is in geography. My degrees are in geography. My master's is in geography and environmental engineering. But when I first started, I was primarily what we call a physical geographer. I dealt with environment, groundwater, pollution, and so on and so forth. But after I came to Tennessee State University, after teaching for several years in the environmental field, we don't really have an earth science program at TSU. And so I started to evolve into an urban geographer. And one of the things that I've always done is write. Writing is my first love. But when I graduated from high school and started to go to college, I wasn't going to major in journalism. But I'd been writing freelance for years. And about 9 years ago, I was reading Money magazine, and they had a list of best cities, and I was reading Forbes magazine, and all these business magazines have their best cities lists. And I noticed that Black Enterprise magazine hadn't done that. And so I approached them and asked them, well, why don't you do it? And they said, well, we really don't have the expertise. But fortunately, with my background in demographics and geography, I was able to develop a methodology that they incorporated into their best cities list. And so we've done it in 2001, 2004, and most recently the May 2007 issue of Black Enterprise. So for almost 10 years I've been looking at cities, especially cities, and their quality of life returning to African Americans. And one of the reasons I got involved in this was I noticed that a lot of the cities that were on the other list were not places that had high percentages of Black people. You had the Seattle, Washington, Providence, Rhode Island, places such as that. And I said, I bet if we queried African Americans, we'd get a different list of cities, and we did. But what's interesting is while you have cities on the list, such as in 2001, we had Philadelphia was on the list, Detroit was on the list, Baltimore, Maryland was on the list. Those cities are also synonymous with problems: violence, urban decay, drugs, police problems. And so it's a strange juxtaposition where we have these, what we call these chocolate cities. All those cities have a very high percentage of African Americans, and African Americans in general report we like to be in what we call chocolate cities, but then at the same time they have all these problems that I just mentioned, failing schools, housing problems. And so I've been studying this over the past, like I said, almost 9 years. And then, you know, with New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina really brought to light what some of the problems chocolate cities are facing. New Orleans wasn't perfect before Hurricane Katrina. It was always a relatively poor African American population living in some very unequitable conditions in terms of economics, opportunity, et cetera, et cetera. You know, New Orleans being what it is, people kind of overlooked. You had overlooked that. One interesting thing that happened to me is when I went to Mardi Gras one year, the African American community, with the exception of one parade, the Zulu parade, they don't really participate in what we think of as Mardi Gras. It's not theirs. Their thing is the Bayou Classic, which I'm going to be attending next weekend, and also the Essence Festival and the Jazz Fest to some degree. But things weren't really fair, equal, and really festive for black people in New Orleans. And then Hurricane Katrina really just opened that sore up for everybody to see. But there are problems such as those that were happening in New Orleans in these other cities, Baltimore, Memphis, Tennessee, and many of these other cities are having significant problems, especially with schools and with opportunity.
Okay, and of course, Dr. Padgett, let's interrupt here at this time for the first commercial break, and to have you, when you come back during that second segment rather, to talk about these cities individually and identify what you consider to be some of the problems. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this short commercial break.